Okay. Hi, this is Hyperwave. I'm Leah Wald here with Tyler Jenks. We have, it's National Puppy Day, so Thor is here as well. And if you guys watched Tone Vase's show right before this, I guess he's influenced me, along with another friend who's watching right now, to break open a glass of wine. Happy Friday, Tyler.
Thank you very much. It is a wonderful Friday. We've just lived through about 1.5 feet of snowstorm the last 2 days up where I am. And I don't think Leah had it that bad, but most of it's melting already and the sun's out. We thought we would take this time just to sort of download. And I'm going to turn it over to Leah to start this off. My idea and Leah's is not so much for us, but for our listeners to think about why they are here in the first place. What got them into it? What was the first thing you heard about Bitcoin or cryptos? What was your entry point? Was it because some people were making a lot of money, because you understood or thought you understood the fundamentals behind what was going on? All of those are very important questions relative to where we are now, sitting here on a daily basis, coming up with content to try to understand this ecosystem that is growing so quickly in such an erratic way. So with that, I am considering that everybody that is going to hear this today or in the future might take something away from our observations about what the heck are we doing here and spending so much time in this little corner of the financial world. And with that, I'll turn it over to Leah just to start us off.
Sounds good. Sounds good. This one's fun. Yeah, it's super random. First of all, thank you guys so much. I mean, Tyler and I only started this a month ago, and I just realized today we have 3,500 subscribers. So you guys rock. You guys rock. And the questions you've been sending in, also, you know, in the live chat and emails, they're brilliant. Like absolutely brilliant. I mean, Tyler and I just talk every day and we're like, I feel like they're, you know, they're just way beyond me. So, you know, serious kudos to you guys. You know, it's just incredible. I think the people in the space. So I guess, yeah, Tyler and I were just chatting today, having fun on a Friday, and realized that, you know, maybe fun to just delve into, as Tyler said, you know, how the heck did we get into this space from our extraordinarily different backgrounds? So, again, provoking hopefully your thought process as well of how you guys got into this, and you know, we'd love to hear it. So I guess I'll start off. So really, I was thinking about this, which was that, so I had the really great opportunity of working at the World Bank as the youngest consultant when I was 19, and I worked under the vice president of the Africa region, Obia Wesley at the time, and she's an absolute, that's Thor, inspiration of mine. But one economist, particularly Marcus Sen, that stands out to me, he said that poverty shouldn't be seen through the standard criterion of income disparity, but instead through the criterion of capability disparity. So I would actually take that a little further, and I think it's opportunity disparity to therefore develop capabilities. And that really, I'd say, opened my eyes to trying to figure out how can we then make the world, you know, flatter in a way, a greater place where more people can have the opportunity to learn, to develop capabilities, and that this disparity, you know, wouldn't exist. And that's when I started to start my own companies, to try to, in a social entrepreneurial vein, address this problem, this issue, and just strive for helping the world in this way, which landed me in business school, I guess, moving forward really quickly when Tyler and I really started, you know, engaging together. Obviously, we have a longer history of a background, but right after business school, I started working for two Thor, two of the top hedge funds on Wall Street, and specifically focused on macro trades for Japanese equities, but also Asian equities more generally, and was confused on a often basis. Would call Tyler, say shorting the BOJ's 30-year, does that make sense, or whatever it was. And it just started to make me think again, just holistically about, finance in a very different way from, utilizing my economics background of how do you make macro trades, and therefore actually by utilizing active investing hedge funds, how could those management come in, shake up companies in a way, increase their, obviously, capital gains, but also shake up companies in a beneficial way, from a fundamentals perspective, where they could employ more people, where it could stimulate economies, where especially in the Japanese economy, and that was back in 2013, really could provide a impetus and a catalyst for growth. Just going really quickly after that, then I delved into venture capital, and that was the first time I got exposed to blockchain specifically. And I was deal sourcing for a company. So this is 2014, for blockchain startups. And I had no idea what that even meant or what that was, but I was very excited. So I will end that there at 22 years old. That I was, where that's when I first just got introduced to whatever this blockchain thing was. So, Tyler, I'll let you pick up from right there.
Well, that's all great. That's kind of the way I remembered it, because as Leah said, we had worked together before, just sharing ideas about finance and economics, and I was pretty amazed at where Leah kept ending up working with just some of the very top people in the field. And that's a difficult thing to do, even if you've got 20 years experience in that very specific niche of finance, and how quickly she absorbed it, but at the same time ended up with a lot of questions. And so she used me as a sounding board. When she first started talking to me about blockchain, I think part of it was because my son and her brother had started dabbling in it with the company that they have down in Tennessee. And Leah began talking with various companies that might be able to work with her brother and my son. But at the same time, I remember, Leah, that you were singing the praises to me of blockchain's ability from those people that you were talking to. You were going to a lot of conferences. You were speaking with people in the space. And you were pretty excited about the fact that the adoption by certain groups and the usage that they were talking about for the blockchain would in many ways satisfy sort of your longing from the World Bank situation in terms of being able to help in things like agriculture and in difficult places and a number of things. At the time, that struck me as a great connection. But the more I looked into it, the more difficult that end game sounded to me. And I wasn't sure why. And that was just a year ago for me. I had been, first of all, exposed to Bitcoin and blockchain prior to the Mt. Gox debacle. And in fact, I got caught in it. I had an account there, and I had started mining. And then that whole thing blew up, and then we went into a bear market, and I kind of walked away from it until Leah started talking about it again. And then a couple of things happened, and I started getting fascinated by the space, mainly because I was looking at price activity. And when my son called me up and asked if this Bitcoin thing looked like a hyperwave to me, that's what really ignited my interest in it when I found that it was. As I've mentioned about hyperwave, to me, it's I'm very proud of the fact that I sort of stumbled across it. I'm more proud of the fact that I spent a lot of time giving it some credence in my own mind. And then I'm particularly proud of the fact that I stuck with it until I understood it, at least up to the point where we are today. And hopefully I'll keep learning. But more important is when I found out what a useless thing it is. Useless in the line of business I was in, which was managing money, because you never saw them. I could go for years and not have a single one of them to use or talk about or put into a client's account. So it got put on the back burner most of the time. Every once in a while, like in 2000, 2001, it became very important to my business. In 06, 07, and 08, it did. Various times in things like the gold market. But there are a lot of days, weeks, months, and years in between that where I'm going into work every day using all kinds of fundamental and technical analysis to help myself, help my company, help our clients. So Hyperwave didn't play a big role until this thing sparked. So all of a sudden, I've got Leah talking in one of my ears, my son in the other, his business beginning to get more and more into blockchain. And then he throws this bombshell on me saying, basically, Dad, remember that thing you taught me years ago about Hyperwave? I think I found another one. And then I was off to the races a year ago or more in terms of the analytics. So that's what got me into it. But I'm going to throw it back to you now, Leah, because what you were talking about with your experience in Africa, where do you come down now on the idea that these ICOs, the tokens, the platforms like Ethereum, still offer what you initially interpreted to be a real opportunity from a career point of view for you to be able to marry two parts of your interests together? Do you still feel that way?
That a lot of what you brought up is really interesting and getting me excited. Also, as per usual, we have brilliant questions and comments in our live chat. 1000%. Being on Tone's show, everybody has seen that I believe all of these ICOs, for the most part, are absolute scams. Sometimes the underlying tech I'm very interested in. I'm interested in seeing what Ripple's tech will do. I think the way that Ripple, the token, was launched is a complete scam. But I guess let me circle back. But yes, as we've discussed before, on a very specific level, these blockchain companies, almost every single one doesn't make any sense at all, just simply put, because it's a zero-sum game for miners, right? So if it's financially incentivizing to mine Bitcoin, no one's going to mine all the many other things and the thousands probably of or tens of thousands, or who even knows at this point, of blockchain projects that are running. So in so many ways, I'm going to turn that back to you in a second on that. But you asked about marrying it with my, economic development background and passion. That will definitely be my passion for the rest of my life. And you're right. So it's very specifically for that VC. It was a VC also with a nonprofit arm. And at least at the time, I didn't know any of the tech behind blockchain, right? And you knew that as well. And just from a venture capital perspective, though, blockchain was getting super hot again, right at the beginning of 2014. Money was pouring in, vows were super high. investors were expecting at least a 20x return. They were, skyrocketed, and it didn't really make any sense. But the space that I was looking in was, again, as we were talking, the potentials that blockchain had for, supply chain management, for remittances, for, all these other social goods. And what excited me was the people in the space. So Tyler knows my father, and he's a therapist. Oh boy, we all know that I was going to end up crazy. But something great that he told me was when picking a career, it's more important to, rather than, any other metric, to look around and see if they're your type of people. So I think at that point, and not coming from a tech background, what excited me was that I loved the people in the space. And what I was soon to realize is they didn't understand the tech of the basis of the company that they were building either. But they were, at least within the niche of international development focused blockchain startups, they were out there to try to do good. They were out there to try to figure out this space. Very quickly, though, from a business perspective, and starting to learn a bit of the tech behind it, thanks to my brother, your son, and all the other, incredible developers, programmers, people in this space, again, that are sharing their knowledge. I mean, that's also something that absolutely, I love about this crypto space is people are there to help you in the Bitcoin community. Even with the most recent, right, backdoored, was it Salim, who was able to backdoor into Ledger, right? He explained exactly how he did it so that we could improve upon, so this community could continue to develop, which is so exciting about it. But it was very evident very quickly from a business perspective that these startups can't scale, right? As soon as you start learning the tech, they can't scale. I don't see customers. I don't see how the simple metrics behind what makes a business an actual business, right? Which is willingness to pay, to have customers, to actually have a solution that is solving a problem rather than just providing a solution and looking for a problem, which I see all the time. And just, again, I wrote about this quite recently, but that a lot of startups are using the term blockchain, as well as, all the myriad of companies as well now that Accenture and PwC and Goldman and everybody is starting to get involved as their point of differentiation. Actually Everfi trying to take on Wikipedia, which we recently just talked about. So a startup trying to use the blockchain name as their point of differentiation just simply doesn't make sense, nor does their business model. Again, it's tech. So I'm not seeing, a project roadmap that makes sense. I don't see agile development. I'm not seeing, efficient ways of launching an MVP and learning from customers. I'm not seeing all the metrics that we've actually established work in the tech space. And, that goes to the point that I did run a tech company. So I guess there's, from the minutia of the devs, I know still very little. I asked Giacomo and everybody in this space a million questions, but to your point, Tyler, I guess what got me really excited first was just simply that they seemed like my type of people. And then to your second point, I couldn't agree more with Tone that I'm not going to use the word scam a billion times over and over, but that the 99% of what I'm seeing are scams. I will say this out loud on our show. I am so happy that the SEC, the CFTC, the FTC, and that the government is starting to figure out regulations. I hope it comes sooner and can crack down on these scams. I'm happy that Google and social media platforms are banning ads for cryptocurrencies simply because I think it'll prove that Bitcoin is king and it will take down these scam coins, because Bitcoin's never needed to advertise, right? It simply never has, it never will. And when people start to understand just the dangers also of these initial coin offerings, I think that they will disappear. I do think in the long run, we've talked about this, Tyler, that altcoins will go to zero. I don't know what that timeline is. There's definitely, they're so lucrative right now that as people continue to pour money into them, there's going to be fluctuations and a lot of opportunities for traders, but Bitcoin's king. And that's the exciting asset class that we talk about with sub asset classes of these other cryptos. But yeah, I mean, then we're getting further in. So maybe the question back to you, Tyler, from the fact that you've been a money manager, I want to hear from the money management perspective, the high level of taking the fiduciary responsibility of managing other people's money rather than what everybody else talks about in the space as TAs, you know, with Elliott Wave and shows their, you know, day trading, et cetera. But you actually have the guts to go and say to clients and say to pension funds, I mean, you've managed large sums of money that, hey, I know what I'm doing and you can trust me, and people do. And now you're here in this space. And we've talked about GBTC live chat. I see a lot of people are asking about GBTC, but you know, why would you be interested in this space, which is so the Wild West, and the word Bitcoin people still talk about as, you know, and think about Silk Road and everything when you come from more of a traditional financial background? And again, with mutual funds, you know, which are very safe investments.
Yeah, great question. And thank you for those kind words. How I ended up here and all of that sort of stuff baffles me today. But with the Bitcoin and the crypto space, not at all. It fits right into what I've loved about trying to understand finance in general, and that is how segmented it is. And until you understand the difference between a large cap stock, a mid cap stock, and a small cap stock, all the way down to what's called a micro cap stock, all of those things only have to do with size, ranging from $100 million in capitalization in micro cap, up from 500 million to 2 billion is small cap, and 2 billion up to about 15 billion mid cap, 15 billion up to almost $1 trillion in large or super large cap. Each one of those segments acts differently. And then you can divide each of those into about 6 pieces. You can divide them into growth versus value. You can divide them into the sector weightings that they tend to take, meaning those things we were talking about a couple of days ago: finance, technology, utilities, consumer durables, and keep subdividing, and you still haven't gotten down to the level of a company. Well, one of the most interesting segments I've ever come across is this one, cryptocurrency, because the implications of it are, in my mind, as big, if not bigger, than any existing market segment. And the reason is some of the things we've been talking about in terms of hyperwaves are very rare. When you find them, you know something big is going on somewhere. Now let's try to figure out what it is. So with the gold market, I keep going back to that because of the fact that all finance today is based on the simple proposition that you can actually barter one market segment for another. You can barter 100,000, well, let's say 10,000 years ago, corn for fish. Or you can come up with seashells, and you can use those seashells to either buy corn or fish. And then the seashells become a medium. And it didn't take too long for people said, okay, that is easier than trying to figure out how every other thing of value relates to other things of value. So let's just all agree, here's something of value. Let's call it gold and silver, and let's put it into some kind of a form that we can pass back and forth. So you've got the Greeks and the Romans and the Egyptians using this third party thing, which today we call fiat currency. But before printing presses and paper and governments and the structure they are, it was simply the idea that we all value things differently, but there tends to be collections of things that we all value fairly similarly. Anything having to do with food, clothing, shelter becomes very, very important. And other things that are ancillary are less important until civilization moved up to where it is today. But all of a sudden, that thing, gold and silver based economies ended about 40 years ago, in 1971, when Richard Nixon stopped the use of it as a way of exchanging between countries and between governments and between individuals. And that's when we went off the gold standard. And from that point on, everybody prints beautiful pictures on pieces of paper and puts a big number on them and passes it around as if it really had any value. And it was only recently where the world as a whole was slapped in the face with the realization that it had gotten out of hand. Now, economists and people in finance, people in bonds, people with credit, all had understood that and tiptoed around it as legislators continued to ignore what was really going on with central banks and treasuries around the world. But that came to an end in 07, 08, and 09. You could no longer ignore it. There was something absolutely wrong after 10,000 years in terms of what we use as a mode of exchange. And then there was a potential solution that a tiny, tiny group of people understood and still do today, which is this simple concept that Satoshi Nakamoto came out with. But he didn't frame it quite like that. And originally, nobody accepted it quite like that. And when I say nobody, I mean very few people. The original hodlers understood what was going on. And it wasn't about making money, although they ended up making enormous amounts of money. It was about, there is a problem, it's universal, and it clearly is insoluble for governments. They've tried, they say they try, but they keep coming up with the wrong solutions. So for me to be presented with this possibility on a fundamental basis with what I know about what's going on and has gone in finance was just way too big of a piece of my experience to walk away from. And so I did just the opposite. I dove in with both feet and began applying some of the principles I saw and knew, and continue to do that without any answers. I'm not saying that I'm sitting here with answers. I'm saying this is a bus I want to be riding on, because looking out the windows of this bus, the territory we are going through is the most significant, beautiful, powerful landscape possible at this point in time. And it makes it just very exciting every day to think about what are we going to talk about today. And what's so funny is by the next morning, there's 10 new stories out. And all of them are significant. And it's important that in the morning briefing that Tone and Leah and Jimmy and other people and Vortex get into those stories, but it's very easy to lose perspective on this much bigger, much more powerful picture. And the next 5 years are going to be some of the most amazing years in human history, not only because of this nexus, this coming together of these forces, but everything going on in the technology sector in terms of trying to solve them. So that's what ended me in this seat today, Leah.
Yeah. Sorry, I love you guys in the live chat. Absolutely. And what it brings me back to, Tyler, is our very nerdy conversations for these many years about, you mentioned this morning, Kurzweil, but from theology to my obsession with fractal mathematics and Mandelbrot to, almost every single discipline. And, my favorite book is, this is super nerdy, but Magister Ludi and Gödel Escher Bach, right? Which is about finding, similarities in all the various disciplines, whether it's a fugue from Bach, to then find as a triad in geometry, and then understanding non-Euclidean geometry, right? On and on. I won't nerd out too much. But with that said, Tyler, we would then always talk about, and this is going to be a question on your hyperwave, right? How all of these new shifts in understanding are paramount. And when you just said right now that it's important to see the overall picture, because you're right. And anyone who watches our morning briefs with Tone, it's a lot of the same stories in the minutia. If you think about it, it's all important stories, whether it's a new SEC regulation or a new regulation in Japan or a new regulation in Thailand, and they're pretty much doing similar things, or a new blockchain project that's similar, again, to another one being done over here in a different country, et cetera. But what does that show? The overall picture, Tyler, you just mentioned it, but I'm going to throw it back to you. What it shows right now is that there is a major damn shift taking place. In it seems more than tech, right? In all the people that are excited about Bitcoin for its beautiful values and principles, for the fact that we have even the word hodl, right? Which is the understanding that the value of Bitcoin will increase. Moon, Lambo, we can play with all these words, but that will continue to increase, that we believe in its future, right? So even from just a theoretical standpoint, beyond trading and making money, that's even just a huge shift of what we're talking about, because it's antithetical to fiat, it's, and then, of course we could throw on gold, but, we haven't been on the gold standard for a very long time. So there's just, it seems like a lot of shifts that are going on. And, people, from my political science background, or international political economy, I guess is my technical degree, and behavioral economics, right? Is just that, it's a revolution. I see it as a revolution from all the, economics that we've placed and statistical evidence on political revolutions. I see a lot of similarities. And so it's just very, very exciting to me that I don't even know what it is, but something huge is happening. And Hyperwave, what you've developed and invented and created and studied, utilizes those major shifts that you find in the world and that you've been able to identify, and are therefore able to create an accurate trading pattern around it, which is just absolutely incredible. So if you could help, you always are able to help me create the mess going on in my brain into something more simple. What is the shift that you're seeing? Oh no, Tyler, we lost your mic. We lost it again. You guys know this sometimes happens. All right, gonna look at your live chat really quickly. You guys rock. Definitely we'll talk about GBTC. Looks like you guys agree on ICOs are scams. That's fun. Who else is having a drink? It's 5 o'clock in Europe. Tyler just went off, but he'll be back in a second. Unfortunately, you guys just have me right now. Let's see. Any questions? Oh, that's a good Einstein quote. I don't know. Skal. Yeah, absolutely. Skal, salud. Hey from Denmark. Where am I? Washington, D.C. Tyler.
Back again?
Back again. Phoenix
Okay,
is
great.
drinking. Cheers to Phoenix in the house. You having a Rita?
That's great.
All right, Tyler.
No, you sum that up very well, Leah. I'll put it in a little different terms. You use the word revolution. This is out and out anarchy. And what I mean by that, and I'm not using the term pejoratively as much as Moore used it, not that Moore that you're thinking of, another Moore, the one that wrote V for Vendetta. And by the way, he's now got a book out called Jerusalem. It's about 1,200 pages long. It's absolutely brilliant. And it's not about Jerusalem. It's about London and the surrounding area. But in V for Vendetta, those people that react very positively to it because it was so stark, black and white, good and bad, tyrant dictator and all the poor saps that had to follow tyranny. And then this savior that comes along, blows up parliament and does all this stuff. Absolute anarchy in a political sense, in a very localized way. This is not in any way simply political anarchy. This is a restructuring not only of the financial system, but the political system, the social system, and every other way, because it is challenging the status quo at all levels. Not only at the level of how can I make some money by buying a new ICO and other people buy behind me and run the price up and then I can get out. There's clearly a lot of that going on. And I dare say that a number of listeners, that was their entry point into this. What we're saying is the deeper you get into philosophically what this movement is about, the unconfiscatability of this digital thing. Now, as has been shown, it is not yet unconfiscatable. There's ways to hack into at all levels, all the way down to the ledgers. And it doesn't take a mathematician or a physicist with 40 years experience to do it. A 15-year-old can do it and did. So this does not have to do with age. One of the things I've noticed about this movement is it is dominated by the young, but is quickly moving throughout all generations because of a lot of forces. It is not dominated by the right or the left politically, although there is a libertarian bent to it originally, but now it's gone well beyond that. Permissionless value transfer, which is a second key element of this movement. In other words, I want to give Leah some money so I can write out a check. I write out a check and I need permission from a third party to have that actually turned into fiat currency in the form of a bank, which is regulated by a form of a government, both at the state and the federal level, on and on and on. Anonymity, which Tone is talked about a lot, and we are not there, but that is part of this movement. Why does this movement want to be anonymous? Well, where you see things going on, like with what just happened to 50 million people on Facebook, what happened at Experian with millions of people, all of their information. Why is that happening? Well, part of it's technology. Part of it is because each one of us now has been cut into so many tiny little pieces and distributed across such a vast area that it's difficult to remember who we are individually. You know, the soul and the spirit of each individual, regardless of what group somebody wants to put us in or that we want to be put in. So the anonymity part of it is just leave me alone. Let me do what I want to do. I will do with and to and for others according to what I believe to be true about myself. I don't want to be told what to do to others or when to do it or how to do it or why to do it. So it's the loss of individualism that comes with government. And that is not a political statement. It's simply the fact that when a group gets together, each one of the individuals in that group has to give up something to be part of the group, has to accept something back from the group that isn't necessarily what they are as individually. And over this last 30 years or so, when this younger generation, and anymore, as soon as you call it X, Y, Z, millennial, baby boomers, it becomes irrelevant because they all are blending together so quickly that we try to force ourselves into a bucket so that we can be like others in that bucket. But the loss of anonymity does not allow you to do that for long. And then the last thing is the fungibility of the movement. Meaning, if I've got a painting that I paid $3,000 for, and somebody tells me it's worth $10,000, just try to get it. Just go through the process it takes to do it. If you want to buy a diamond or an emerald or a ruby, and you think that's an investment, that's one of the most foolish things you can do, because the process you must go through to get this thing supposedly of value and to turn it into something else, such as fiat or Bitcoin, or barter it for something else, is so egregious. And you end up starting with about a 20% of the value you think it is. And that's all you will ever get for it. But you paid 5 times that amount for it. That's the fungibility side of an investment. The great thing about exchanges and the stock market and liquidity and things that can move relatively quickly is the fungibility. When you as an individual make a decision, I have this and I want that, you can snap your fingers and get it. That's when it's fungible. Without asking someone in between, a government, a financial institution, a creditor, for permission to do that. But the structure has gotten so burdensome, so difficult that we can't do it. So it's those elements to me that are the big picture. And either the Bitcoin revolution, the Bitcoin anarchy will be destroyed from within by those that are attempting to water down those things, or it is so powerful that it will overcome them and then be able to do all of the things that we're talking about. So to me, that's sort of the big picture. And I know, Leah, this whole concept of anarchy, it's such a pejorative word to most people, and you've studied it in depth. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, you know you're getting me excited. Hold on, there's a reverb. If it's better, let me know. Hold on. Let's see if we can get that better. Yeah, although I ascribe to anarcho-syndicalism, as you guys know. Oh, sorry, as Tyler knows, and I did study it quite thoroughly. But honestly, I mean, Elucidate Reclus is my favorite, right? Bakunin, Goodwin, Kropotkin, Malatesta, Reclus, Bookchin, down to actually Tolstoy's writing, to Gandhi's writing, taking it further. Some of the most incredible movements ever. Let's go to Mexico, the Zapatistas with Subcomandante Marcos. You know, nonviolent resistance movements are founded in bases of anarchy. Now, anarchist history and thought, true philosophical belief of anarchy is not the current community, or I'd say cultural anarchy of graffitiing, you know, big A. But what it actually is the purest form of democracy, the state, not the state, not being necessary because of kind of this pure Jeffersonian democracy where people actually have a say via true consensus. Now, therefore, you're correct. What excited me also so much about the essence of the crypto world, but specifically Bitcoin, which is also why I get angry at all other altcoins, because they are centralized. And that is the clearest reason and the biggest reason why I am vehemently against them. I think the wine is starting to kick in a little bit here. But it is simply put that the Bitcoin community, not Bcash, not B trash. All right, now Tony is getting in my head with the alcohol. But Bitcoin is this beautiful community of open source, of helping each other, of decentralization, and in that purest form, just like you were talking about, Tyler, a revolution, and not these negative terms that people associate with anarchy. And let's demystify that for a second, which I always find funny, right? You know, and this is something that Andreas Antonopoulos talks about, but you know, when the internet first came out, everyone said that it was just used for porn, right? And look at it today. Bitcoin started to gain waves, and you know, people still only associate it with Silk Road until pretty much past a year and a half, when everyone got FOMO and tried to invest in, right? So these changes also, you know, so I'm going a little bit further, but are funny in that you will get such a disruptive technology that has pure innovation within it, and yet, you know, fear of inadequacy on others' behalf to be able to adopt it is just insane. How people are just so scared of change, and how it comes, I truly think, from the root of a non-consensus in the population of feeling confident enough of desiring to adopt. Now, then again, we have this strong community that is just so damn strong in the Bitcoin community of those helping each other to develop, to strengthen. Look at Lightning, look at Liquid, look at everything that's happening consistently, you know, that we talk about in the news with Tone's Bitcoin Morning Brief, of all these developments to ensure that all of Bitcoin's bugs and issues can, you know, and then kind of this civil war going on with Bcash, that Bitcoin wins, and that the pure Bitcoin wins, the blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain also, that the purity of it is maintained. And that purity in my eyes is still, you know, comes from this anarcho-syndicalist belief that pure consensus is behind it, that a desire, and therefore a desire for its movement forward and its strength. And again, going back to what I said before about hodling, about the community believing that that strength united together through our community can ensure that the value will continue to go up, which also means for hodling, the price will continue to go up. What's interesting also, though, maybe back to you, Tyler, is that, right, Bitcoin is changing with more of this FOMO. And people talk about it no longer being really a currency because people are holding it and therefore potentially a store of value, yet we trade it, right? You know, it being listed on the CME, the CBOE, right? It now being considered sometimes, you know, a security, but some countries still trying to figure out, at least with the ICOs, is it a security, is it a utility token, you know, kind of all over. Last thing to mention, you know, we trade GBTC. And obviously, because that's a security on, you know, on the NASDAQ, sorry, in the New York Stock Exchange, it's OTC. So we, you know, we believe in the merits of trading on the exchanges, on the financial institutions recognizing the validity, and also in us trading, therefore adding liquidity, and therefore us doing our own part from our expertise. And you're the trader. I'm just learning this stuff. To be able to add to the community in that way. And as ETFs finally get passed, which are still down the pipeline that we talk about, you know, and more instruments and more vehicles that are recognized and blessed by the SEC and valid, you know, I just think that creates an even bigger community that is based more on consensus. And I know people are, you know, get mad at me for being conservative about being for regulations in this space. But again, that's because I believe in Bitcoin, and I believe that will make and ensure that Bitcoin wins in the end, and that the blessing of the government regulators will therefore be involved in this community as well to push it forward through consensus. Tyler, the question really to you that I'm curious about then is, from an institutional money management perspective, you know, how do you think that let's say, quote unquote, smart money, as people like to say, moving into the system, the big power players, you know, if we talk about CME, CBOE, we've talked before that, you know, potentially what happened with the rise in Bitcoin was simply the big players having to buy a lot of it to be able to do the future options trades, et cetera. How do you think that this is going to change the game? Are you excited about it, with you being from the background that you're coming from?
I am very much so. However, we are not there yet, and we're not even close. I would not put into any of the accounts that I manage any cryptocurrency, including Bitcoin, because it's so darn almost impossible to do. When the wallets and the exchanges are as porous as cheesecloth, which they are, that is not fiscally responsible when you're handling other people's money. That's why I use a very inferior substitute, a security called GBTC.
And Tyler,
yeah,
talk especially quite a bit on GBTC, guys. I see your comments on GBTC.
Yeah. When I make a decision to buy gold, it used to be very difficult to put into clients' accounts. You can't put gold bullion into an account for a lot of reasons. But then along came a thing called an ETF and the GLD. The GLD allowed you to buy a security that only bought one thing, which is gold bullion. Now, by buying a security, I've got the protection of the regulators, the protection of the exchanges, the protection of the security of the groups that are holding that gold, plus insurance policies if something goes wrong along the way. A lot of people don't realize that if you've got an account at Fidelity, yes, it's guaranteed by the government up to a certain extent, but all of the big exchanges or platforms have available enormous amounts of insurance to insure accounts well and above of what the government programs do. In some cases, up to $100 million per account. So instead of me going and telling a client to go to a jewelry shop or a gold bullion trading organization, taking money, going there, picking it up, not knowing what to buy, how big is the premium, bringing it home, what do I do with it? I put it into a safe. No, I don't want it in a safe. I'll put it in a bank in a safety deposit box. No, that doesn't make sense, because in 1932 and 1933, the government confiscated all of the gold that they could get their hands on in a safety deposit box, on and on and on. Or you press a button and you instantaneously own GLD, and 10 minutes later you press a button and you instantaneously get out of it with all the protections that are built in for normal stock trading. Same thing with Bitcoin. At some point, we will be there. We've only got one place to do that right now, and that's GBTC. It's been announced by that company that they are trying to bring 3 more Ethereum and Litecoin and, if I remember right, Ripple into the same structure as GBTC. And I know Tone doesn't like that, and Tone doesn't like GBTC. I'm coming at it from the perspective of your question, which is, as a fiduciary with other people's money, I would rather play the game of figuring out the premium that I'm willing to pay when I make that purchase for a client. And when I figured that out, which I did last fall, I feel perfectly comfortable putting it in or taking it out of a client's account, with me taking the fiduciary responsibility that everything's going to go smoothly. So at some point, 6 months from now, a year from now, 3 years from now, somebody is going to work out the details of how you can buy and sell Bitcoin and or cryptocurrencies and or store them without going through all this silliness of writing down 24 words and putting it into a special place and putting that into a special place and putting that into cold storage. And oh my God, was that word that I wrote down wood, W-O-O-D, or is it W-O-U-L-D, or oh no, it's out of order, I just lost everything. That is the ultimate of stupidity. And this group is way too smart, way too intelligent to allow that to last very much longer. But until it does, as a fiduciary manager, what I will do is I will give people advice about what I see in terms of the analytics and let them on their own make a decision what they are willing to do in terms of taking the risks involved. If I have the fiduciary responsibility over that money, that's exactly the way, what I just said is exactly the way I approach it.
I have nothing to respond to that one. It's fascinating. I guess what actually was coming to my mind is just, again, our extraordinarily different backgrounds, but shared passion for crypto. With my latest startup, most people probably wouldn't know, is this a company that helped connect unemployed and transitioning veterans in the United States to mentors and service a job placement. And what stuck with me was just how absolutely difficult it is to find employment, even for, heroes of our country, and how much people resonate with employment and what they do and how much they make as an indicator of their value right now. And for so many people in so many economies around the world, and I'm totally gonna I'm emotional, so it's difficult for me to even articulate clearly. It's just not possible. I mean, if we go to, again, my background in the World Bank in sub-Saharan Africa, but also having done consulting gigs in rural India, specifically in Gujarat and on the Pakistani border, and in rural China, in El Salvador, et cetera. It's not possible to get out of the death trap of poverty in these countries. And the capability, again, going back to what we began with, Mark just said, the capability disparity and the opportunity disparity just is so wide. You can't get out. So what excites me, again, from my background, just moving it again to Bitcoin, is just this huge opportunity to join a community and actually raise yourself out of not just poverty, but also just to feel connected, to learn from one another, to work with one another. But again, to have something that you can be extraordinarily proud of, to feel capable again, to make money in beautiful ways. That's just an absolute diatribe rant there. So please take over before I keep going. And by the way, Tyler, I think we've been boring our viewers for over an hour at this point.
Yeah, we will bring this to an end. It's been actually the big sins in my life because of my particular spiritual background are different than in many other with many other perspectives. They have to do with self-love, selfishness, self-justification, and what Leah just described is the opposite of that. So I think you put it very well. And one of the wonderful things about what is happening in this space is, again, as Leah articulated, those in the space that are willing to give time, effort, and money to help the space because of the belief of what it stands for and what it can accomplish. So thank you all very much for sitting alongside us, even though we don't have a fire going, but I am moving in a week to a place with a wood-burning fireplace, and I can't wait to get there. Thank you very much, Leah.
Thank you, everybody. It'll be funny. I'll be in North Carolina in a cabin in the woods with some friends next week. So we will light up our fires and maybe have some moonshine and do this one again, Tyler. But everybody, thank you so much for watching. And again, it's a call to action for you guys to think about why you guys got involved in this. And I can't wait to hear about it. So thanks.
Thank you very